Hi, my name is Angelic Williams, and I'm an LGBTQ entrepreneur.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, we are welcoming Angelic Williams, joining us all the way from Oakland, California. Angelic, welcome to the show. Are you ready to inspire fellow Out Bosses?
I will do my absolute best.
Yes, no doubt. So just a little bit of background about Angelic. She is the founder and CEO of MyUmbrella, which is a social networking platform for the LGBTQ plus community rooted in wellness, inclusion, social, and education. She is a third-generation entrepreneur and grew up in a family of small business owners and was intimately involved with the day-to-day operations. As a result, she's well-versed in the grit and perseverance required to start, sustain, and grow a business. Prior to founding her company, she was an architectural designer involved in a variety of projects. She is a San Francisco native and holds a Bachelor of Architecture and a Master of Science in Real Estate Development from Columbia University. So, Angelic, I'm really thrilled to have you on the show. We had a friend of the show, Andy Kramer, Al Farmer, who were like, you have to talk to Angelic. So I was like, okay, we're going to make this happen. And here we are. So it's happening, which is always awesome. I know just a little bit about MyUmbrella, and I was hoping that you can share a little bit more about this business and what makes it unique.
Right, no problems. Well, thank you for having me. So MyUmbrella, as you mentioned, it's a social networking platform for the LGBT community. And really, what makes us unique is that it's a place where you can come out, be out, find your community, find LGBT-owned and friendly businesses in your area, find different resources. Because for me, I know we'll get into this a little bit later, but for me, in my experience, and I know for a lot of others, you just get lost. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what to look for. You don't know how to find other queer people, whether you live in the gay mecca like I did in San Francisco, or if you live in rural Nebraska where some of our users are. And so we really wanted to create a safe space that was not about dating. It was just about community. It was not a subsect of a larger social network. And it wasn't driven by someone's, visceral point of view that may be present on Reddit or Twitter. And so that's who we are. It's what we believe. And we're just here to build a safe space for queers around the world.
I love that. So there's a number of things that this kind of networking platform does. And in the bio, we talked about wellness, inclusion, social, and education. And so talk to me a little bit more about what those kind of categories mean to you and how that helps the LGBTQ community.
Right. So when we started, we had an initial idea of what we wanted the platform to be. And, we surveyed people in our network, people that were outside of our network, about what they really wanted. And a few things really, really came to mind, top of mind for a lot of people. The primary one was mental health and access to health services. And so really listing those resources out for people where they can go find people that specialize in this, or they can get the help that they need or get information from those locations. Inclusion, the number one thing we got was the fact that the greater LGBT community is very whitewashed, it's very male dominated, and there's no space for people of color, for trans people even, to have a space. And so we really want to make sure that our community and our platform and down to our marketing reflects how diverse the community really is. Social, again, providing different events that aren't just around bars and partying, because that doesn't fit every demographic, every age group, every interest level. And so providing an online social experience, and then also resources to offline social experiences. And then on that final piece of just being education, one, just learning more things and one thing that the LGBT community does not have are sort of social scripts. We don't have the movies of boy meets girl, they fall in love, they do this, they have kids. That's a very specific script, and we don't really have that, as well as educating those within the community, because there's a great deal of bi and transphobia, and we want to do our best to educate those people in and out of the community about how some of these lesser seen orientations and identities actually are and how they operate and who they are as people.
This is a really comprehensive social networking platform, and it's absolutely needed. I love the example that you shared. Even if you're in a gay mecca or LGBT mecca like the Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland, New York City, there's still a need for kind of just knowing the resources that exist, because there are so many. And then on the flip, being a part of, in a smaller, more rural community, I grew up in Central Florida. It was very difficult, in the late 90s when I was coming out, even to find resources. So the fact that you're building this is amazing and obviously super needed. I'm curious, as you're building this out, is it kind of open source? So if I lived in Oklahoma City or something like that, I could help kind of populate, community groups that are around, or, friendly, trans-friendly medical providers or whatnot. How does it work? How do you build it out?
Yeah, so we definitely have resources. The one good thing in particular about resources is that locally, the LGBT communities are hyper organized. So the information is not very hard to find. That being said, we cannot be everywhere. Our team is based in the Bay Area. And so we definitely welcome people to email us, say, hey, here's a new place, here's a clinic, here's a bookstore, here's a coffee shop that's queer owned. And we will be working to integrate a feature within the app where you can directly enter that information and we can look at it and say, okay, let's go check this and verify to the greatest extent possible that this is a legitimate resource, and we'll add it in. So yes, it can definitely be crowdsourced, and we welcome any and all recommendations because the world is very big and our team is very small. So
Yeah. Have you thought of kind of teaming up with, used to work at an organization, PFLAG National, where you have these chapter-based organizations all across the country that have their kind of own ecosystems where they're all relationship focused. So they kind of know through word of mouth, these are the mental health professionals that are really LGBT inclusive, and these are the social groups, et cetera, et cetera. Are you building collaborations that way as well?
yes, so here, the Golden Gate Business Association was the world's first LGBT chamber of commerce, and partnership with them. And then we're going to be working with them to go to all 50 affiliate chambers of commerce, as well as working with local groups. So yes.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, and the chamber network, the LGBT chamber network is super powerful, and starting with the National LGBT Chamber. So it's smart that you're going that way. And just like thinking of the opportunities and some of the work that I do around LGBT organizational capacity building for like big government agencies, like this is one of the number one requests is kind of where do we find resources? How are they vetted? We don't have the capacity to do something like that. So as you're building this, I'm sure you see all of that potential. How do you prioritize sharing this platform with potential partners, like a government agency of some sort? Have you mapped that out, or is it kind of, as the opportunities arise, you kind of pivot and kind of consider them as they come?
It's a little bit of both. Sometimes we do get people that reach out to us, or certain situations, we'll get an introduction of someone and we'll start to explore that. Our general priority first was working where we are. So working on those partnerships in the Bay Area. And then the last year and a half or so, I've been working to build my network in these different spaces. And so, I have a very close relationship with Kate Kendall, who is longtime executive director of NCLR. I have contacts with the ACLU. And so we're really working to build those larger networks because they have access to everyone else. And not just because of the brand recognition, but also because there is a lot of pinkwashing, specifically during Pride Month, where a lot of companies are, for lack of a better word, just pandering to the community for money in the name of inclusion. And, we definitely don't want to be lumped into that group. And so by associating ourselves with these other organizations, that gives us further credibility and the ability to spread our word.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're authentic and we are here for the right reasons.
Absolutely. Kate Kendall's awesome. ACLU, Amber Hikes has just joined there as their chief diversity officer. So, these are folks that are trusted and really have a good lens of kind of sifting through the pride, as you say, like the pinkwashing that happens, and really identifying those organizations and groups and resources that are actually doing the work to be truly inclusive. And it's a lot of work, right? It's not just kind of developing a product hoping that LGBT folks buy it, right? So so this is awesome. So I'm curious, as your business grows, how are you measuring your impact and success when you're working with your partners and potential people that are going to opt in and use the social platform?
That's an interesting question. So right now, we really measure an overall reach, daily actives, monthly actives, what pages they're visiting, seeing what's being visited the most, what's the most valuable resources. And then we're working now to reach out to our users directly and poll them like, hey, is this feature working? Is this feature not working? Because the worst thing is building something that someone doesn't want. Meanwhile, you're overlooking something so simple, but they just wanted that piece.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're working on building a tool to help bridge the gap between HR and diversity inclusion departments at companies and their LGBT staffs, as well as school administrations and LGBT students on college campuses. And so once we have that tool developed, we're in research and development on it right now, doing interviews with people. Once we have that tool developed, we really will be able to measure our impact in terms of people's overall mental health, how they're feeling, how welcome they feel, and be able to create these benchmarks and say, okay, before you had this in your life, you felt this way, and now you feel this way, and you have access to this, and you know these people. And sorry, I get a little emotional thinking about it, because we do have some users that have been with us almost since day one. And right now, we really measure impact through what they're posting and seeing the stories of some people, and they tell this story arc, and you're just on the journey with them. Mm-hmm. And there's a few people where I can think off the top of my head that in a few months, I'm like, wow, you have come so far. And I don't know why here, but I'm so glad you have the outlet to do so. And watching people comment and give advice and say, hey, I've been there. That's really, in the worst days, is what keeps me moving forward.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. The benchmarking pieces, the data collection, you're trying to find as many numbers as possible to communicate like this is the impact we have, and sometimes it's following one particular person who's on this platform, right? Who is sharing a really compelling story where obviously, emotionally it has impacted you, and to communicate that to some of the partners that you're working with, right? Like if you're talking mm-hmm. about to workplaces around the importance of LGBT inclusion, we know it's good for business. We know what the business case is, right? But when you're sharing, really specific stories, keeping people's names out of it, right? Sometimes right. That's the piece the emotional piece that leaders need to hear to say, okay, where do we opt in? Where do we do the work? How do we do the work, right? And then you're off to the races. But so the fact that you have this kind of, the social platform to collect all of that, that's powerful. That's super powerful. So awesome. I really love what you're doing. I'm curious, your origin story. So you had mentioned in your bio, you are a third generation entrepreneur. Awesome. Congratulations. It's awesome that you have some possibility models in your family. And I also know, from looking at other podcast interviews that you've done, that you definitely, when you kind of left Columbia, you have your architecture degree, you had a pretty great job, right? And so when did you decide I'm going to take the leap and I'm going to be like my family? I'm going to be my own boss. Talk to us about that.
Right. So just on the origin piece. So it's interesting. My grandparents, my parents, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, they all had their own businesses. And so growing up, I didn't know the word entrepreneur until I was about 11 or 12. I literally thought that you had your job. You had your company that you worked on, and it was your thing. And then you had a job for, I didn't really know. I'm like, why do people have jobs if they have their own company? I just did not know, because that wasn't my life until I went to my best friend's house. And she's like, my mom works at the post office. I'm like, what's her other job? She's like, no, that's it. That was a real wake-up call in middle school. So my story, I grew up wanting to be an architect. I love designing. Design is my life. It is my favorite thing above anything else. And I grew up wanting to have my own firm, same as my family. And I did a 5-year Bachelor's of Architecture program. I was on track to finish it a semester early. And so the summer before my last semester, I ended up having a freak accident that revealed that I had a nerve disorder in my hands, whereby if I pursued architecture full time, I ran the risk of losing all feeling in my hands starting between ages 35 and 70.
Wow.
But they don't really know case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
So, that was 8 years ago. So at the time, 22-year-old me said, if I can't design buildings, I'll get them built. And so a professor of mine mentioned the real estate development program at Columbia. I said, okay, this is what I want to do. And I went there, came back here, got a job in real estate, realized 2 things. 1, that I was really, really good at it. And 2, that I really, really hated it because it was boring.
Yeah.
Go from designing and ideating to pushing paper, dealing with bureaucracy. Same end results, but different part of the game. And so what happened was in 2016, there was a series of unfortunate events. The first was me waking up to the fact that I hated my job, where I worked, and fundamentally what I did for a living. Mm-hmm. So that was one. The second was I realized that I had lost a lot of my gay circle of friends just between moving, or you grow up, you grow apart, different things happen, people get married and get sucked into that world. The third was my younger cousin was killed tragically in the summer. In fact, his birthday was yesterday. He would have been 23.
I'm sorry.
And so that was really, really difficult wake up call, and made me think, what am I doing with my life? To end tomorrow. I saw him on June 4th, and 9 hours later he was gone. So, what am I doing? And the last thing that happened was Mike Pence was announced as the vice presidential nominee.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I knew who he was from his time in Indiana. And I realized, oh my God, there is an insane person that could be in the White House that knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
He knows the system.
Oh, yeah.
And I felt, I'm 105-pound Black queer woman in America. I don't have a lot of privilege. Mm-hmm. But the one that I did was that I grew up in San Francisco, and I felt a fear like I never felt before.
Yeah.
And I went online looking for a place where I could talk about this. And I just wanted to share my feelings and know that I wasn't the only one, because I knew that I wasn't. And all I could find were people's just tirades on Reddit and people undercutting, and then same thing on Twitter and a few groups on Facebook where there are a few like popular kids, if you will. And none of it really worked. And I said, this is stupid. It's 2016. We have technology. Why isn't this a thing? And so I took a coding class when I was 17, good at it, hated it. But I realized that, Angie, you spent a good amount of time learning how to design things, and you also know how to run a company. And the rest is architecture. Mm-hmm. You literally make a pretty picture and you figure out how it's going to work in real life. And that is the story of how MyUmbrella came to be.
Oh my gosh. It's awesome. I mean, the name itself it feels like a blend, under the umbrella, you have like all of these skills that you've mastered, and you were able to just transformative moments that were happening in 2016, and stars were aligning just to kind of give you that push, right, that you needed just to get out there and lead. And the fact that you've created this platform where we all can come to it, right? And to kind of process how we're feeling in this moment, because it is terrifying, right? And it's also, right. I mean, the flip of it is we have to be the change, right? If we don't like this, like we can create things to kind of show a different way. And I think that's everything that I'm hearing from you and of what I know about MyUmbrella. I mean, you're doing it. So that's empowering, and that's awesome. So I'm really grateful that you're stepping up in this business leader role. It's so cool, right, that you do have family that can kind of be on the sidelines or be there with you to kind of offer that support. And not all of us in kind of this entrepreneurial world, it's almost kind of like coming out in a way, like you were talking about not having these social scripts. For many of us, we don't necessarily have that kind of guidance. That's really cool that exists in your family. Are your parents like super proud and supportive, or people in your family knowing that you're on this path now?
Yeah, they're very supportive. I mean, my dad worries a lot, just in the sense of, because when you do something like this for a particular group of people, there are always people on the other side mm-hmm. that, don't want any of this to happen. And so he worries a little bit about safety things, but for the most part, he's very excited. And every time I see him, he's like, I have an idea for your business, or I saw this on TV and you should get this book. And so, yeah, they've been incredibly supportive, and it's actually opened up a very different relationship with my parents that I didn't have before. Yeah. Because I saw them working a lot as a kid, and you don't understand why certain things. And, now I find myself in situations, and I ask my mom, who's very soft-spoken, about, did you feel this, or how did you manage this? And it's really good to be able to have that, a phone call away or a text away. So yeah, very grateful to have my family on my side and being supportive and invested in this.
Yeah, and that's an important point around safety, especially when you're standing up for a marginalized community like LGBT folks. The fact that you are putting yourself out there. So parents likely worry about everything because they love you, right? And so, yes. And they're also supportive, right? They're there to give you that business advice. So I want to talk about your business a little bit more, but we're going to go to a quick sponsorship break, and then we're going to come back and continue the conversation with Angelic Williams. Hey, Outbosses, Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBT entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business. To know that you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting business. In fact, I'm on a mission to empower leaders just like you and those on their way to joining us to cultivate cultures of belonging. In my upcoming book, Belonging at Work, I share some of my personal struggles of coming out as a trans guy in the workplace and how I leverage this experience as one of my business superpowers. Now, I'm on a mission to support you in taking simple actions that will make a world of difference for anyone who has ever felt as if they needed to hide important aspects of themselves on the job. When you commit to purchasing a special, limited edition copy of the book, a portion of your purchase will support expanding workplace opportunities for fellow transgender and non-binary people. An added bonus, your story about what it means to belong at work will be featured on the book's website to inspire others. You're ready to belong at work now. To learn more, visit rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type the word belong. Again, that's rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type belong. Okay. All right, Angelique, I wanted to ask you just a few more questions on your business. Mm-hmm. The first, talk to us about how MyUmbrella has grown and what's now possible that wasn't anticipated when the business idea was first conceptualized.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I think that a lot of founders and entrepreneurs, and myself included, struggle with being able to appreciate what you have done, because you're so in the moment and you're so on the go all the time that you can't step back. And, we've been live since last June, and now I'm at a point where I can actually have those markers of last year we were here. And so last year we set it up, had a very baseline model, not a lot in it. It was really just about getting it out, getting it launched. And that was the only focus. The next was working on growing it and, what's our revenue model? What's our business model? How do we sustain this? And, how do we get the message out? And so now it's really about building partnerships and working with those partnerships. And just what we're working on now with our business model, I'd be hard pressed to tell you 2 years ago that this is what we'd be doing. I would have said, you're out of your mind. And, we have a lot more room now than we did before, because now the product is up. It's about maintaining it, making sure that there's no bugs, building new features. Once those features come out, we can move on to other things. And, our team has, when we started, it was me, a friend of mine from high school that helped me outsource the development. Then a friend of mine from college joined onto the product, and then we brought on an in-house CTO and data engineer last year and a product intern this year. Yeah. And so now my time is a lot more free to actually go do my job and business develop and work on partnerships and strategy. Whereas before it was fully product, and I'm still involved in the product every day, but it's not my sole responsibility, and that is amazing. Yeah. So just having other smart minds, having a great team, and having the confidence to let them go do what they do best really frees me up to think about where can we take this platform, where can we go, and who can we talk to, and continue to grow it.
Yeah. I really like what you were saying about, being able to appreciate what you've already accomplished. And I think that that's something that we'll definitely kind of get into. We have a separate kind of spin-off version of the show, which is our office hours. And I think that celebration piece is super, super important. And, as entrepreneurs, we tend to, set our goals and then we accomplish them and then we move kind of the goal line even further out, and it's just it's like a recipe for burnout. So I really appreciate that. And kudos to you for hiring the experts, surrounding yourself with super smart people so that you do have that time to be the visionary, and to kind of constantly be in that perch to see, the next opportunity and being open to that. So that is the dream and you're living it. So congratulations there. Right now, in your business, what has you most inspired? What's making your heart sing?
Oh man, what has me most inspired? So we did a contest for Pride Month, and we gave away $500 gift cards for the best Pride photo, and there was no parameters. It was just any Pride event, post a photo, show your pride in the app, and we're gonna pick 5 winners. And we had people from Philly, from Denver, from Portland, from Atlanta, Bay Area, Miami, and New York. It was all over the place. And it was amazing to see Pride around the world. But it was also amazing to see people's captions. We even had people that said, hey, I can't even go to Pride in my city, but here's the outfit I would wear.
Wow.
Yeah. And
it's powerful.
People saying, this is my husband's first pride. He came out to his family last year, and they're married and have a son, and this man just came out to his family last year. It's insane. And seeing those stories and seeing people celebrate who they are and loving their community, that was the best. And it made the judging so difficult.
Mhm.
I thought it would only be about 20 minutes. Spent an hour doing it, and then we ended up giving out 4 honorable mentions just because they were all so good.
Wow.
And so that is the most inspiring. That is
Yeah.
the most.
That's awesome. I mean, it goes back to kind of the stories that you're able to see happen live, as you follow people
Right.
on your platform, and just like the piece about pride, carving out like the pink washing that we talked about, but like the power of pride is that, right? Is the kind of the reality of where people are at in their own journey of coming out to themselves and loving themselves and being able to express that in any ways. And just the power of knowing not everybody can, they're not ready, willing, or able to go to a pride if one even exists in their town or their city.
Right.
But that picture of like, if I could go, this is how I would be, I mean,
Yeah.
that's amazing. That's really cool. So last question on business, and it goes back to the inclusion element that you were talking about before, which I love. We can probably think, and we'll go to that in just a bit, about some examples that aren't so great in the workplace. But I'm curious for you, knowing what you know about being LGBT at work, what's one thing that you're doing in your business to change the game, to show other businesses how to create a more inclusive culture?
Yeah, so our team's pretty small. So we have four people on our team, and then we have our intern and a few advisors. And I'm not sure if we're doing anything specific, to be honest with you, but our team is incredibly diverse across everyone on the team, including our advisors. There is only one person that is Caucasian, and half of the team identifies within the community themselves. But what I do, honestly, and this is something I did at the beginning of my company is, I have a platform where I encourage people to be themselves, right? And for good, bad, and ugly. As the leader, I do the same with my team. And so they know, my dad was in intensive care earlier this year. They knew it was happening. I would tell them at the beginning of a meeting, and they'd say, "Do you want to have the meeting?" I'm like, "Yes, we're having the meeting. I'm just telling you." So you just know what's going on with me in case I'm unresponsive later on. And what that has done has allowed them to be more themselves. And so I know a lot of things that are happening in their personal life. I know a lot about what's happening with their identities and how they show up in the world. And, even I remember our CTO, when I was interviewing him, he said, "Is it going to be a problem because I'm straight?" And it was, I actually laughed because I wasn't prepared for that question, but
Yeah.
it was interesting that I feel like we're going to get this question a lot. And I said, no, no, no. It's we don't care about that. In fact, like we love having the diversity of thought. And to be honest, the rest of us are way too close to the issue. So you're going to see something
Yeah.
totally different that we're not going to see. And so, allowing people to really be themselves and really embracing what they're good at and knowing who they are, what drives them. I'm not sure if we're changing the game or setting the bar, but that's just who I am and how I like to work and how I treat people. And that's what I like to do with my team.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're being really modest and kind of questioning if you're doing something different in your business, and it starts with hiring, right? And the fact that you're hiring people that aren't all white, all straight, I mean, or all LGBT. I think your business, your company looks different than kind of the majority in the United States. So that is a model, and your hiring practices too, where you are attracting people that aren't necessarily within the LGBT community or all people of color, right? And so there's an art to that as well, where people, someone who feels the mission of your company, like really feels aligned with that and is a straight ally, that's pretty cool. So kudos to you for doing that. And I think that's a great example for other folks who tune in, just to think about that. Think about your own hiring practices. Think about how you might be able to do that a little different. And kind of look around, look who's on your team. Think about how meetings go. Is everyone agreeing with like what you're doing, because that then goes to the diversity of thought piece as well. Okay, so Angelic, let's go jump into the Rainbow family, and let's talk about kind of how you fit into the communities that we're all kind of a part of. And it starts with kind of I think the hardest question of our interview today, which is this kind of, thinking about your workplace experiences. If you could take us back to a time that was difficult for you to be 100% out or authentic at work, can you think of an example, number one? And if you can, let us know a little bit about what was going on and how you were able to work around that.
Yeah, so I have the perfect example for you on that. I've actually been very fortunate in being in a lot of very open workplaces, but including, the workplace I'm going to mention right now. And I remember this conversation. I was probably had been at that job for about six months or so, and we all have a great relationship with each other, all within 3 to 5 years age wise of each other. So a lot of similar experiences. And just to put it out there, I do not label myself in terms of sexuality at all. And that's something that is more mainstream now, but it was not very common a long time ago. And it's still difficult for people to understand that. And people say, "Oh, well, what are you?" And I'm like, "I'm Angie."
Yeah, I
"Hello,
like that.
nice to meet you."
Yeah.
And, I was trying to explain this to my coworkers, and it was two of them that we had become really close. And they were like, "I don't understand that." I'm like, "Okay, well, it's not really for you to understand."
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Well, you have to be something." And I'm like, "I am. I'm a human." And we went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And, for me, I told them my rationale for this is labels exist for two reasons. One, because we're, tribal pack animals by nature. We like to feel like this is where we belong, this is where we fit. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that school of thought. The other side of that is labels exist for other people to know how to address you and where to put you in their world. And I don't sign up for that. And so I just don't do it at all. And so they kept trying to come up with they were literally looking up orientations on the computer. Like, what about pansexual? What about this? I'm like, I know all these. Leave me alone. So I said, "Okay, we're going to come up with a name for you later." And I'm like, "That's fine. Just leave my office, please."
Wow.
So, but by the end of the day, they came back and they said, "Okay, we have a name for you." I'm like, "All right, tell me who I am." And they said, "Greedy, because you like everything." I'm like,
Whoa.
and I said, "You know what? I will take that. I'll take it. That's fine. You can use that." And it was partially, I thought it was funny that that's literally what they came up with.
Yeah.
And also, I just desperately wanted the conversation to end.
Yeah, that's super uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, on the
Sorry.
flip side, and like I said, it's not a horrible place. I mean, it did become that, but overall, it was not a horrible place to work. But on the flip side, I was at a client meeting with our CEO down in Paso Robles, and it was a church client, and we worked with a lot of churches and schools and things like that. And one of the clients says, "Okay, let's buy this building." Because it was owned by the Methodists, and the Methodists also have the same stance as we do, that they don't recognize same-sex marriage. And we could never occupy a space where those people were allowed. And, I just sat quiet because it's a client meeting. I don't really say anything. My boss had to leave early for another meeting, and he says, "Hey, can I talk to you outside for a second?" And I said, "Yeah, that's fine." And he goes, "Are you okay? Because that comment is not okay. That's so offensive. I swear to you, I'll fire them right now, because no amount of money is worth my employees feeling less than or uncomfortable or made to feel different." And I was really touched by that. He's a really good guy. And I told him, it's fine. It's not unusual. It is what it is. Long story short, they ended up being total jerks. So I should have told him to fire them. Yeah. So I mean, there's definitely pros and cons of that workplace, just like any other workplace.
Yeah, yeah. And so was in that scenario, was it clear that the client had a feeling that some folks on your team were a part of the Rainbow family, or were they just totally just talking and
Just talking.
Yeah.
Just talking completely.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great example of your supervisor at that time, just to know you and to kind of know the communities that you're part of, and just to kind of say, "I've got your back," right? I mean,
Right.
How often does that happen? I mean, that's a great positive example. On the other example, I find it really interesting, the strategies that you had to do just to shut the conversation down. And it's our greatest, one of the things that we, some of us within the Rainbow family strive for is just that ability to self-determine who we are. That's part of the cool thing about being a part of the Rainbow family, is that it's on you to kind of control your own narrative, In those situations, I definitely get it, where it's just sure, whatever, go away. So yeah, I mean, those are really good strategies, just in terms of how to kind of keep going and get through the day and kind of limit your losses, I guess. It's the hardest question, but I really appreciate you sharing those examples. And I hope that gives our listeners who struggle with this in their own workplaces a little more encouragement to keep going and to test out some of these ways just to work around some of the more difficult or annoying personalities in your office. Let's go to the empowerment piece, which is all about what you do in your business, and kind of thinking about these not so great stories of being a part of the rainbow family, and then other really beautiful parts. I'm curious for you, kind of thinking about your own lived experiences, what might be a particular superpower from being a part of our awesome rainbow families that allows you to stand out in your business today?
I think there's a number of things. And before I answer, I think it's difficult to pull it out singularly because there's a lot of intersectionality between being a minority, being female, and being LGBT as well. So it's a little bit difficult to pull out, but I think they all come together and create that superpower. And I would say that one is you just develop really thick skin. You just develop it. And what I mean by that is situations like at work. Like that you're going to deal with a lot of people saying, really terrible things or really ignorant things. And at the end of the day, you still have to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I work with this person who I fundamentally hate and or disagree with in a professional way? Because clearly they're not up to the task. So now it's up to me to actually be an adult and do the right things. I think that's one that I would say for sure is a superpower, because dealing with difficult people is not easy, and it's a recurring theme. And I think that walking through life as a member of the LGBTQ family, you just see things differently. You see things out of the box because you've had to. You've had to create the scripts for yourself. You've had to create the sense of normal. You've had to create the sense of family that you may not have been fortunate enough to have in your own family. And so I think there's an ability to see things that other people don't. And then I would say what makes it a superpower is being confident enough to display it to everyone else.
Yeah.
Because that's the hardest thing, is you see something so different and you just have to own it and embrace it and say, you know what, here's my idea. And if you think it sucks, well, you 47 people all had the same idea, and at least I was original.
Yeah.
There.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. I love that. I think that I appreciate you talking about intersectionality and being othered because of your race, because of being a woman, being a part of the LGBT family, rainbow family. So right, like it's difficult to pin down. And at the same time, I think a lot of folks who are tuning in can definitely, what you're saying resonates with many folks, of just kind of this ability to work across difference when, like that particular client that was just, woo, right? Like, okay, now you know how they feel about LGBT folks, and you're on this team. Do you still show up and do the work? And you did. You were able to develop that resiliency of like, okay, I know how this person or this group of people feels, and still moving forward, still being diplomatic. And that's a real skill. The lens of seeing something different, and being able, right, this has come up on the show a lot, of being able to kind of translate or code switch of like, okay, this is the world from the view of a straight cisgender person. And now here's my world over here, and how I can appreciate that. And I see all these other things, and just being able to communicate to that person so that they can understand the world that you come from, I guess, but still being confident enough. Like that last piece I really love, of just still showing up and being as authentic as you feel safely that you can be, and challenging some of those worldviews or quote unquote norms, whatever that means. So I love that. I think that's a really, really, really awesome response. So thank you for sharing a little bit of the superpowers that you've gleaned from these experiences. For the folks that are tuning into the show, whether they're working for themselves in their own business or they're working for someone else, what do you want them to know or to take away from our conversation to be a little more inspired, just to show up more authentically at work?
That's a really difficult question in a lot of ways for me to answer, because I was just doing a talk this past Monday, and someone asked me 3 things to tell someone who's on their coming out journey and experience. And the third thing that I said was, everyone, I'm a big Drag Race fan. So at the end of every episode, RuPaul says, if you can't love yourself, how are you going to love someone else? Mm-hmm. And I love that phrase, but love is a very strong word. And accepting is also a very strong word. And it's really hard to do that. And so my response was, just try and like yourself. And that's what I would want people to take away, because it took me a long time to get there. I grew up as a very awkward child. I grew up into a semi-awkward adult, and it makes for interesting conversation. I like that in my life.
Yeah.
Do I love it? I don't know. But I like it. I don't know how to be someone else. And I've tried being someone else, and it was miserable. It wasn't fun. I just hated everything. And I would just say, be you, because the exact same things that I was ridiculed for and picked on as a kid and in college, I'm now being celebrated for as an adult. And so I would just say to just always be who you are, because if you're not getting good responses or you're just in a negative environment changes everything. Yeah. So don't change who you are just because you happen to be around sucky people at this particular moment. So
yeah. Yeah, I like that, I like the concept of getting to liking yourself, right? And what's in the way, maybe identify some of those barriers. And also kind of look around, examine, self-assess the environment that you're in. And if it isn't one where you feel like you can be you and be yourself, what does it take not to change yourself, but what would it take to change your environment? And it might not change tomorrow, it might not change 3 months from now, but what's the plan you can kind of put in place to get to a place where you're working around cool people like us who want to get to know you and who you are, So I love that. I think that's really, really good advice. It makes sense that you were in front of the room sharing some of this to the audience. Okay, so Angelic, just 3 more questions for you. And the first is just around this idea of, for folks thinking about getting started, or many of us who have been on the path for quite some time, how do you kind of overcome or make friends with or acknowledge and move forward with like the feelings of like imposter complex, that you're not ready or you're not ready to launch that next product, or et cetera, et cetera?
Oh my God. This is my daily struggle.
All of us, right?
This is my daily struggle. Oh man. This is definitely a me thing. I don't know if other people can take this mentality, but for me, a lot of this was started because of, the death of my cousin, and also the struggle that I went through. And that's why I do it. And I always tell myself, if you give up, and whether you die today, tomorrow, next year, are you going to be okay with that? If you can walk away safely with no wonders of what if, then walk away. Yeah. If you literally feel you've done everything possible, then walk away. But if you can't, then you have to figure it out. I don't know how. I don't know if it's meditation, therapy, going out and, hanging out with your friends for a little bit, but figure it out. Because that feeling, that what if feeling, is worse than imposter syndrome. And I know from other experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to have regrets, right? Right. So it's like, it's there. It's probably going to be there indefinitely. So it's like, just learn to either acknowledge it or somehow acknowledge and be buds with it, and just say, all right, you're there, and I gotta leave you behind right now and do the thing. Right. And I'll come back to you. So yeah, I like that. Let's avoid the what ifs and just kind of move forward. And I think that feeds into this second to last question, which is just, we talked about what it would take to be more authentic, in our work. But I'm curious, for those folks who are tuning into the show and have been tuning into the show for the past couple of years, they still haven't taken that first entrepreneurial leap. What advice would you give to those folks?
I would say start small. And what I mean by that is, as a founder, no one is going to love your baby more than you do, because it's your baby. And you can see the whole vision, and you can see everything that's amazing, but it's also an overwhelming feeling. And focusing on the end goal is crippling a lot of times. And so there's a concept of the 5 whys, right? If you ask why 5 times, you get to the root of the problem. Like, what happened? I hit my toe. Why? Because I did this. And you finally dig down. And I've done this with my friends before, where they'll state a goal, and I say, okay, what would have to happen for you to do this? Well, we have to do this. Okay, and what drives those things? And they give an answer. Like, okay, and then what do you need to do to get there? And we just keep walking it back until we get to like a manageable piece.
Yeah.
In the example that I'm talking about, my friend wanted to play a live show. We walked it all the way back to, okay, you need to find like a credible studio to practice in for 2 hours with your band. That's your first step. And, she played her first show a few months ago, and it was awesome. So yeah, I would just say walk it back to until you get to a manageable piece that you can actually work on.
Yeah.
Because worrying about the whole thing it's honestly crippling, and it's crippled me several times.
And with that, just a question for you, because I love the 5 whys, and I think it's a really valuable way of just getting to some kind of like singular, concrete, simple action. On the flip, right, the value of maybe not dwelling on the ultimate vision. What are your thoughts on just kind of still being able to define that vision and being kind of clear as you can in this moment of like what it looks like and what it tastes like all of the things that can make it seem more possible? How much time would you encourage people to do that visioning work?
I think it's important. You obviously have to. I mean, obviously the goalpost always moves as we've discussed, but you have to start with a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me wants to say, when you start to feel crippled by the visioning, stop, because then you're going to talk yourself out of it.
Yeah.
But the other part of me says that, we spend a lot of time talking about what we're not versus what we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also just as important, because if you don't know what you are not going to be, you'll get dragged everywhere and you'll have mission drift, and suddenly you have a company that you didn't even envision having in the first place. You're like, well, how am I here? This sucks. So I would definitely, if it starts to get overwhelming, stop, but also think about what you're not. So in our example, we're not a dating app. That's our number one thing. Like, we're not a dating app. We'll never be a dating app. That's not who we are.
Right.
And it's very important that we know that. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And sometimes it's easier to kind of say, I've done all of these things. Here's like 2 out of 15 things that I really like, but I'm not going to continue doing these other 13 things. It's kind of like that negative space, in kind of visual arts where you kind of draw around something and then you have the thing that you're trying to draw. Sometimes that might be a little bit easier just to start, if you're more in that space of like what you don't want to do, it can get you closer to what you do want to do. So I love this. I think this is really, really good, solid advice. So thank you, Angelique. So we're at the end of the interview. And I would love to know the singular best place that we can go online to learn more about you and MyUmbrella.
Singular best place would be to remember the handle MyUmbrella HQ. That's our handle on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And if you're searching us in the App Store, that's how you'll also find us.
Nice. Cool. So MyUmbrella HQ, we're definitely going to have that in the show notes. So again, Angelique, thank you so much for spending your time with us today and all of the insights that you shared. Lots of really valuable wisdom. And so I hope this was really helpful to the audience. So Outbosses, thank you for tuning into this week's episode. It's always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Angelique. So for details from today's conversation, go over and check out the show notes at outentrepreneur.com, or you can just text OUTBOSS, all one word, to 444-999, and we will connect you with all the good stuff that we learned today. As a next step, consider subscribing to the podcast, leaving a rating and review wherever you consume the podcast. In particular, iTunes. It's one of the best ways to share the show and get it out to friends and loved ones. And lastly, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.